allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
justice for all.
And we'll move right on to roll call.
Andy Mary,
Yes.
Jim Balzer,
Here.
Mike Foldig,
Here.
Noel Deep,
Here.
Wayne Gagnon,
Here.
Jeannie Long,
Here.
Mary Neufeld,
Here.
Danny Pyatt,
Here.
JD Schrader.
Okay, and then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Somebody like to make a motion?
I move the board approve the minutes from the September 22nd, 2020 Board of Education meeting, financial report from September 2020, consideration of current bills, check numbers 4143 through 4237 in the amount of $233,061.05, ACH number 202100166 through 202100302 in the amount of $1,360,490.54, and one wire transfer in the amount of $13,378.44 for a total of $1,606,930.03.
I'll second that. Okay, any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Okay, then we'll have a roll call.
Balzer,
Yes.
Foldig,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Neufeld,
Yes.
Pyatt,
Yes.
Schrader,
Do I vote again?
The agenda.
Consent agenda. Yes.
and Mary.
Yes. Okay, and we'll go on to public comment. Is Mary Kay, can you check and see if anybody has signed in there?
No, you're not.
Andy, can I solicit public comment? Terry, how would you vote on this tax increase? Would you take some out of fund balance or would you?
Yeah,
No,
I'm
no,
not gonna
JD,
do
that
that,
is out of
JD.
order.
I'm not gonna do that. Okay. And we'll go on to the student report.
Hi, I'm Noelle. I don't know if any of you remember me. I was on a virtual meeting, kind of. Here's my face, if any of you didn't really see me.
Sort of your face?
Yeah, sort of my face, kind of covered. So I'm going to go over sports, activities, and graduation. Starting out with sports, we have tennis. They sent earlier this month 2 of their members from the team to state. They unfortunately didn't make it to the second round. Then we also have football coming up with a game this Friday. It'll be home, and they'll have a senior night. Swim has one more meet coming up November 7th. Cross country is done. And then we also have boys soccer, which they made it to playoffs, but unfortunately didn't make it to the second round. Then we have activities. We have student council. I don't know if you guys can hear me. And we talked about Captain Poetry. That's coming up November. We're going to donate a bunch of food to the food pantry and other community kind of activities. We're going to have dress-up days and other activities like that. And then we have 3 proposals for graduation. We have one, the traditional. We have our drive-through. And then we have kind of a combination of both, which we're also going to have like presentations for like a few other clubs that we're going to go through. We want to have that at the fairgrounds. We're going to have those kind of like in cars, and then we can also have those set up in the fairgrounds where people can be with their families and kind of walk up, and then we can also drive through, kind of like the parade with a combination of both.
Hello, I am Bailey. This week I spoke with Jocelyn, who is a remote learner for 8th grade, and we talked a little bit about her classes and how things are going. She's taking math, English language arts, social studies, and Spanish right now. She told me that she feels like the homework load is adequate. She gets about 6 or 7 hours a day of schoolwork. Everything right now for the 8th grade is through Google Classroom, and her math class holds Google Meet classes daily. She told me that the teachers are very accessible through the email, and once or twice the assignments have been late because of internet difficulties, but the teachers are flexible and understanding with that. She said she feels like learning the material is the same as in past years, and most of her peer-to-peer interaction occurs in English language arts. They have a book club that has weekly discussions. And she said her biggest struggle right now is math and social studies, which are harder to do virtually because the teacher is not right there showing you, and there's like a lessened ability to stop the teacher and ask questions while they're teaching. But yeah. Do you guys have any questions for us? Or what questions do you have for this week?
No, for Noelle, I think you missed the volleyball team. How'd the volleyball team end up?
So volleyball had their last game Thursday. Unfortunately, they didn't make it through to the playoffs. It was also very emotional for a lot of the seniors. Didn't go very well.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment. I see with the boys soccer team, not only did they make the playoffs for probably one of the first times in school, but they actually won their first playoff game in school history. So I think Coach Wilhelm and the team deserve some kudos for that, because
Yes.
good accomplishment in some rather bizarre times.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will go on to the COVID update.
Okay, I have 3 items to update this evening. The first is we had asked about the numbers of remote learners testing positive for COVID, and Darlene shared updated numbers with me just today. So we have 6 who've tested positive and are remote learners, and 1 also an RDA. And then currently, that was since the start of school, currently we're down to 3 who have tested positive. And then Mary was just mentioning on the COVID dashboard, that's why I don't send those, it felt like daily emails, because the numbers are on there. But what we don't have showing on there are the numbers that are quarantined. Darlene, I don't know if you considered that, but I do know those numbers fluctuate daily, multiple times a day, of course. But you track those who are quarantined. Yeah.
I do, and there is, one person, in the past, one person who circulated from school to school actually took out, there were 3 classes that had to be quarantined because she was in those classrooms for an extended period of time, plus she ate lunch with a teacher who was from a different class. So, we do have quarantine, we send a lot more home quarantine than we have positive, but they come back on a rotating basis, so that would change frequently.
Right.
So we do keep track of those. I manage them in Infinite Campus. Just yesterday we did have a positive case, but this student during lunchtime spends his whole 25 minutes with a group of boys, and that group of boys ended up being 7 kids because they all spend that time together without masks outside during lunch. So it just depends. He had 7 boys in one group. We had another person who only had 1 close contact. So it just varies.
Thank you. We do have an update regarding devices. We are now 1-to-1, grades 4 through 12. Mark Kautza and his department, we had enough devices shipped that we were able to accommodate the middle school and East Elementary. So on the next couple Fridays, between inventory and moving some around from if middle school has extras, etc., they hope to get West and North pretty close to 1-to-1-2. The only shipment that remains delayed is the first grade touch iPads, and it's been delayed by another month. Now they're saying the end of November. Yes. But again, we're getting closer, so. And then with Q2, you know, we reached out to our families and we asked them about their learning choice. Do you want to come back in person for Q2? And we allow students to go remote at any time. So I have some numbers here for you. In the high school, we've had approximately 50 additional students choose in-person learning, but 21 choosing remote. At the middle school, 46 are opting to come in person and 6 have selected remote. Now, elementary is a little bit different because they welcome students in person at any time because their cohort model, combined with having a separate remote teacher for each grade level, allowed as such. So really, since the start of the year, East has accepted approximately 13 more. West, I would say, is at least 13, and they're up to 80% for second quarter will be in person. And North has accepted 6 more, but 14 have selected remote. So those are the updates. And I don't know how it happens, but to date, we haven't had to tell any student whose family is interested in person that the numbers aren't right or we'd like you to reconsider. We've been able to accommodate everyone, which is really important to me and I know to the teachers. So, and that concludes my COVID update unless you have questions.
I do have a question for Darlene.
Yes.
You mentioned about the students who are in close contact with no mask for 25 minutes. Did I understand you correctly?
I'm sorry?
Did I understand you correctly to state that there were 7 children who hang around together in close proximity with no masks?
During lunch.
That's outside, correct?
Yeah, yeah, they do, we do have some students that do go outside and eat lunch. And they, I mean, in the cafeteria as well, they try to stay as distant as possible, but this group of boys they were not farther than 6 feet apart for the time they were eating lunch.
There's nothing
So
that the
that's
schools
why
can
they
do.
were all excluded as a close contact.
Well, they're eating lunch, I mean.
But at least we can encourage them to social distance.
Social distance, yes.
Yeah, the social distancing is really difficult because there's such a great amount of people that are eating lunch at one time. They have them as spaced as far apart as they can. But if somebody tests positive, that's where most of the students that have to be quarantined are coming from, are the people that they're eating lunch with. Because they cannot get 6 feet apart with their mask. And they're talking and being social at that time while they're eating, so they do get a lot of our quarantine at the high school do come from the lunch room. It's not a large number by any means. For the most part, the group we sent home recently was the largest that we had sent home. Otherwise, it's usually 2 to 3 people if there's a positive. And luckily, we've not had that many positives from that we had to go and contact trace through the lunch room.
But that can also contribute to community spread of the disease.
Right.
So I guess it's incumbent upon us when we are keeping the schools open to encourage them that they follow the guidelines. And maybe we need to have some proctoring available when people can ensure that they maintain that distance. We are seeing a significant surge in this community.
Right.
We are bursting at the seams and I don't think that is right. We need to do what we can to ensure that we don't provide that nidus for the spread.
No, and I agree, you know, they have it set up, everybody is facing in one direction, but, and when they get done with eating, they put their masks back on. Some need to be reminded a couple of times to put their mask back on, but they do after they get done eating. But that's a social time for them, and they are not able to, with the number of kids that are out in the lunchroom, they are not able to spread out 6 feet apart.
Was this high school or middle school or?
This is high school. In middle school, I believe they eat their classes or cohorts, right?
They eat within cohorts, and right now we're able to keep them pretty much 6 feet apart, but with the numbers increasing, I don't know if we're gonna be able to. And then we all have them facing the same direction. And we have students not talking during that time. And I think the only group that we're still struggling with is 6th grade. But otherwise they're not talking, so that's been helpful. Not always conducive to that social, but that's what we've been doing, and it's been working pretty well. And they put their masks on.
Bailey and Noel, would you like to weigh in on this and tell us what you think? How much people are, how long they're dragging their lunch out so they can talk? How's that for?
I think it really depends on the social group or clique that we're talking about, because some respect it more than others and take it more seriously. But I think for the most part, everyone acknowledges that it's a responsibility that students have to protect each other. And I don't see during lunch that it's a huge problem right now. And there are, like Darlene said, there are efforts to social distance us. Like, we must sit at least one person at every table. So I think that's helpful. And we are facing the same way, and for the most part, people have been following that rule as well.
Okay.
And a lot of us are reminded to put our mask back on when we go dump our trays out, so we're not spreading it as we're going to kind of clean that all up. I think Schofield always comes up to the mic and reminds all the students. I know a lot of kids outside will run around without masks. I see that sometimes, but very few.
Inside, I think it's pretty much controlled.
Yeah.
As well as possible.
Okay, thank you. Darlene?
If I could just ask, for the next board meeting, do you want me to put together the numbers as far as the quarantine numbers? Would that be helpful for, I can give them to Julie to report off on how many kids are quarantined compared to what's on our dashboard?
I think it would be nice to know over the time frame from this meeting to the next meeting, how many classes had to quarantine,
Okay.
and maybe what schools those were, or what classes, what grades those were.
Okay, I do, if I'm thinking correctly, we currently have one class out in West. They are due to come back next Monday. There is no classes are out in North. East Elementary, we have one class out, and that class is also due to come back on Monday. We do not have any classes, we have one class out at the middle school, and they, again, are due to come back Monday. And of course, we don't have any specific class out at the high school.
Okay.
Darlene, how many are there staff members out right now being quarantined?
Staff members, I'll go by school. West Elementary, we have 5 out. We have 1 positive case. And the other, one of them is waiting for results to come in, and then the 3 of them are close contacts. And at East Elementary, we have 4 out. all of them close contacts. Two of them are close contacts to family members. And three of them are, and one of them is a close contact to a staff member who is out, and that's at East. At North Elementary, we have 5 out. Again, close contacts, no positives. Middle school, 4 out. 2 of them are positive cases at the middle school. One of them is due to be off of isolation in 2 days. And the other one is due to be off next Monday. And then at the high school, we have 6 out. And 2 of them are positive cases at this point. The others, one of them is home because their child's class was quarantined. And then everybody else are close contacts to family members.
Okay,
And we've got enough bodies to cover all of those positions?
Yes, they've been doing very well.
thank you,
And
Darlene.
one of the people out at the high school is because of a close contact with a positive student in the class.
Positive student,
Thank you. In Dr. Deep, you mentioned that there is a surge in our community. Is there anything you'd like to share with us about how the hospital's handling this, or?
Well, the hospital is doing good, the doctors are doing the best, the nurses are. But over the past 2 to 3 weeks, it's been extremely difficult with the number of patients that are in the emergency room, the number of people that are being admitted to the hospital. You've probably read in the news and heard on the news too that people are, it's getting difficult to even find them beds at times. Sometimes we are spending an enormous amount of time trying to find a hospital that will accept a patient from the emergency room, long hours, and sometimes sending them to Wausau, Medford, Rapids, Stevens Point, Green Bay, Madison.
Oh,
It's very difficult when you have elderly patients who might have to go that long distances. Their families have to travel there with them. They have to bring them back. And older individuals are at a much higher risk for complications and even fatal outcome from the disease. So
right.
it's becoming difficult to find rooms for them.
So our hospital is essentially maxed out.
Yes, we have been. It's ebb and flows, but for the most part, we have been running at full capacity to admit patients here. And it also affects your staff, the amount of work that you put in, the stress that it puts on them, especially taking care of the COVID positive patients. It's donning and docking the PPE and everything puts up stress there too. So you can't have a nurse take care of the same number of patients that they have done maybe a year or 2 ago before this happened. And the amount of work that you put in to take care of the patients also, you need more bodies to take care of them.
Is that a lot of people on oxygen or a lot of people on actual incubators?
We don't keep a whole lot of people here on the ventilators. We have limited capacity for the ventilators. If people get really sick and on the ventilators, sometimes they have to go to Wausau because Wausau has a COVID ICU unit and they have the regular COVID unit. So I think the CEO put out a email and also message out in the paper that while they had planned that we'd probably have 25-30 patients, last week we had in excess of 80 patients in-house with the COVID across the system. It's a large volume.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question that I was just thinking. When we started talking about reopening and bringing the kids and the staff back, we talked about the cleaning and the sanitizing, and I thought that we talked about possibly hiring some housekeeping type positions in the buildings to help, like, I think they have them at the middle school and the high school, but what about the elementary school? Do they have, is it still just the one custodian in each of the buildings, or do they have, and I see Jake isn't here, do they have other people helping
Tim, I'm not sure if they have additional. I do know that we're still using that sprayer.
The fogger, yeah.
Yeah, the fogger, thank you, that
Okay.
sanitizes everything weekly.
But what about daily? How does daily work, Tim?
Mary, we haven't, at the elementary level, I don't believe we've added additional staff. Other than the, the number of students is certainly down from what it would have been years prior. Other than that, without speaking with Jake, I can't comment.
So is it
Either one
incumbent
of
more
the-
on the teachers then to ensure the cleaning of surfaces in their rooms, or who does that?
Rachel and Donna are here.
Darlene, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, the teachers, number one, Mary, to answer your question, every room gets fogged every night.
Oh, every night?
Every night.
Okay,
Every
okay,
night,
sorry.
Jake has advised me, every room gets fogged every night. They have like 20 foggers in the school district,
Okay.
so they all get fogged. As far as in between use, they all have a container of some wipes that only the teachers use because you have to wear gloves. And then we have sanitizing wipes that's got, I believe, it's close to 80% alcohol wipes. So it's safe for students to use, so they're available if the students want to come in and wipe their desk down before they sit down, and then they can wipe it down after. Otherwise, I know a great amount of teachers that are taking time in between each class to make sure that the surfaces are wiped down.
That was my question, that's an extra pressure on the teacher.
Yeah. And the students are welcome to use those alcohol sanitizing wipes if they choose to do that to make them feel more comfortable.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
anything else? If not, that will wrap up the COVID report, correct? And we will go on to new business and the approved committee of the whole minutes.
I move the board approve the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting on October 13, 2020.
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay, any questions or comments on those? Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Item B is policy manual review, 1000 administration. This is, I said we would work our way through reviewing policy. I don't intend that we're going to read all the policies here or anything like that, but if anybody has any questions, comments on anything that they reviewed? I went through it and it was all pretty straightforward and I thought we're online with it all. So. Okay, Jim or Jeannie, any comments from you?
Nope, not for me.
Nothing on my end either.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you're still there. We'll go on to board action items. And item A is consideration to approve the tax levy. And that's Tim. If you want to make it. Go ahead.
Okay, so I've got a presentation. Let me see if I can figure out how to get it up here.
Yeah.
Make a motion first?
No.
Okay, this setting the levy is something that we do every year. And the information I want to go over tonight isn't something new, but I want to take a little deeper dive into what goes into setting the levy. And like anything, it's really, we've talked about the revenue limit formula being a balance between state aids and local taxes. And that's a very simple concept. But as we get further into how that all works, it's more complicated than it might seem on the surface. So today I'd like to just spend a little bit of time before you actually set the levy, so you have a basis to make that decision. And it's just a little deeper dive than we would normally take.
Kim, as you go through these slides, could you just say which one you're on for Jim and Jeannie's benefit?
Okay. Jim, can you see the presentation on your computer?
I'm watching it on the live stream right now, and it's not centered. But I do have the documents that you sent me last week, and I'm looking at those.
Which one do you have opened up to?
It should be the, I think I have a PDF as a presentation.
I think it's called setting the
Setting the levy.
levy.pdf. It's the second row to the right.
Dustin, can you swing over here? It's not advancing the slides. All right, so I'm on slide 2, and it's titled Timeline. So basically, things really, we don't get accurate data until starting third Friday count. That happens in the middle of September. Then on the 1st of October, we get the apportionment of the equalized values from the Department of Revenue. Then on October 15th, we get the aid certification from DPI. And on or before November 1st, the board's required by statute to adopt a budget and set a levy. We've already adopted the budget back at the budget hearing. There was a formal adoption, so we've met that standard. So between the 15th of October and November, we need to go ahead and set the levy. So the basis behind the aid formula is really how much did we spend relative to other school districts. And it also is a reflection of what we did in previous years. So what was going on at the end of last school year? And essentially, we're still under the ramifications of the impact of the coronavirus. We had school closures. There was talk about having an emergency budget repair bill. And I knew that we had spent money from fund balance with consolidation and getting ready for consolidation. And I thought the prudent thing to do was to cut spending. And I've listed here areas where we took action. We froze advancement on the salary schedules. We basically cut our utilities by, keeping the buildings locked down in unoccupied mode. We cut we didn't approve expenditures for classroom supplies. We cut all co-curriculars. We paid 65% of our transportation, and we had no substitutes because we had no substitute teachers or support staff. And we ended up, this is a document you've seen before, and essentially it's our fund balance. And when you see it reported, last year we had $5.4 million in fund balance. This year we have 6.8. But as board members, the points I want to bring across are fund balance isn't just cash in the bank. As an example, the first line up there says non-spendable prepaids. We're showing $365,000 in an insurance payment. We have already made that payment for July insurance. And this is 1 day in time. That's the other important consideration. The next item that's down there is a committed balance. That supports our self-funded dental and our HRA as part of our health insurance plan. It's $1.4 million. It's dedicated to health insurance. It's not used for anything else. The next is the Common School Library Fund. That money can only be used in the library. And it's an aid, a categorical aid that we get from the state solely for the purpose of improving our library for our students. The committed was the $75,000 to Neboken. The next one is the unassigned fund balance. And that's truly what represents, to me, what our actual fund balance is. And you can see we went from 3.3 million to 4.2 million. And again, that's one day in time, and it's not cash in the bank. Because this, and on June 30th, we haven't received our July tax payments yet. So there's payables that go into that, but that's essentially our working capital. The next grant carryover is something we've talked about before. But what I want to point out on this slide is, so in our, let's call it a cash account, we saved $827,000 that we built into fund balance. And if you look at the bottom of the slide, you can see that last year we finished by board policy is greater than 10% of the preceding year's general expenditures. In 18-19, we finished with 12.2%. This past year, because we saved money, we reduced our expenditures, we built up a little bit of fund balance, and we finished the year at 15.9%. Okay, so by doing that, we had an aid impact. And what happened? General aids are down 4.62% over the prior year. State support's down over $700,000. Again, we've got the simple revenue limit formula, state aids plus local taxes. And the levy's going to be going up by over $1 million, or a mill rate increase of 10%. Later in the presentation, I'll try to explain why, if the state aids are down $700,000, why is the levy going up by $1 million? And we'll talk a little bit more of that in detail. This is a 36-year history of our mill rate, and you can see, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we were significantly higher than we are right now. When you look at this chart back in 2004, we had a very similar levy. The mill rate is slightly higher.
To 2014, right? You said
I'm sorry, 2014, yes. Yep. This is a mill rate comparison to our neighbors. And I'm comparing this year, the number I know, the $8 versus all of our neighboring districts' previous year's mill rate. So now let's take a look at the biggest piece of our revenue stream is equalization aids. And equalization aids are, on first glance, they're pretty simple. The state shares in our cost, and it's basically comparing Antigo's wealth and Antigo's spending to the other 419 school districts. So let's take a little closer look at what that looks like. So in your packet, I've got this slide up, and it's a graphical representation of the aid formula. And in real simple terms, you have district property wealth on the bottom, starting with poor districts going to wealthy districts. And then we have expenditures going from low to high. There's 3 packets of aid: primary, secondary aid, and tertiary aid. So it's really a proportionate how you compare in each level. So the closer you are to the left-hand side, being property poor, you're going to get proportionately more aid than the districts that are closer to the right. So if we look at primary aid, let's start out with Anago is showing $497,000 worth of property value per student. The state average is the tertiary guaranteed level. So you can see we're poorer than the average school district. And our primary level, this box, is set by comparing our district value versus the state guaranteed level. So primary aid, for every dollar, for the first $1,000 we spend, we get roughly 75 cents for every dollar we spend for the first $1,000 in aid. That's our proportion. The secondary side, it's a lot tougher to figure out. The size of this box changes with the average expenditures, 90% of the average expenditure across the state versus the state allocation for, versus the state allocation for general equalization aids.
Why don't you guys get your microphones on or your speakers?
Is that mic?
Maybe this like it should be on so they can hear it, but if the speakers are on your computer, that meeting.
Dustin, we okay?
I think there's some feedback coming from somebody. I'll mute them if it happens again.
Yeah. Okay, so essentially we're looking at this box. And the level of this box changes based on 90% of the average cost. 90% of the average cost is $10,030 this year. Last year that number was lower. Anago is sitting here. The proportion of aid we receive is the proportion of our number to the secondary guarantee. How close are we to this bar? In secondary aid, we're still getting 65% aid on a dollar spent. So then tertiary, we're at this 90% level. If we would have spent more, we could have gotten aid, and proportionately you can see we're much closer to the line. So on tertiary spending, we're going to get less. My point is, I sent you an example of the 420 districts. Some got additional aid and some got less. You have to know where a district is on this chart to understand. As an example, if Annabelle would have been up here and negatively tertiary aided, so a reasonably wealthy district spending money, by them spending less, instead of getting negative aid, they could get positive aid. So that the October 15th certification doesn't mean a whole lot unless you know where a district is on the curve. Anago this last year seemed wealthier and we spent less than the previous year, so we got less aid to the tune of $700,000. Questions?
Are there years where we get tertiary aid?
It depends, Andy, on this expenditure. So as this moves up and down, it'll affect whether we get tertiary aid, or our expenses, we spend more and we go up.
So how do you know in advance before the school year ends that you can do that? This is after the fact that you are...
This is after the fact. And I knew that we got a July 1 aid estimate, but I knew we were under COVID. And the assumption I made was that other school districts would be cutting our spending, their spending. I didn't take into account those that were tertiary aided. But you don't know it until after they run it. In a year like COVID, you also don't know it. What's aided is everything pretty much under the revenue limit. Categorical aids get taken out, and all of our federal grants and our state grants get taken out. So we're looking at really the revenue limit formula. So if you have an operating referendum or if you have, you're paying you have debt to pay off. Those are all aided. So as districts go out for referendum, they're affecting primarily this level right here, that secondary ceiling. And as that moves up and down, it's going to change how much Anago gets. How much are we spending relative to the other 419?
So Tim, you're saying that a district that would have passed a referendum last year, maybe for $1 million per year, those are the districts we're seeing that maybe got 20% increase in?
They could likely be, Andy. But again, you have to know where they are on the aid formula. And the poorer they are, for every dollar they spend, the more money they get. Questions?
Tim, I think something that you said that helped me understand it better was that by the board being more conservative and saying that we're going to take this and put it into fund balance and trying to be more conservative, we ended up shooting ourselves in the foot. Do you remember explaining that to me, and could you go over that again?
Jim, I think that the point being, had everyone in the state of Wisconsin followed Anago's lead, and again, if you're a tertiary aided district, negatively aided district, by spending less, you're going to get more aid. That's counterintuitive. But if everybody was cautious, we would have likely had not had as great an impact. We spent $9,501 on average for the aid portion, the shared cost. The actual amount, I think in the memo, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's like, on average, districts spent $300 more per student this year than they did the previous year. So districts spent more rather than spending less. And that's essentially what really hurt us. We were kind of like an outlier over the other districts in general, as a very, very broad statement.
So, go ahead, Jim.
I think you said thanks.
Okay. So, when we looked at this before, and we talked about whether or not we should put money in fund balance, your thought was, and I think the board's thought was, that things are uncertain. We don't know what the legislature is going to do. We should put some money in there.
Well, Andy, we even had the discussion about putting money away in Fund 46. So Fund 46 is a capital improvement fund. That would have meant that if we did that this year, and again, we were being conservative, we were cautious. We were hearing that there's a likelihood that there was going to be a change to both the revenue limit and possibly the per pupil categorical aid. If we would have put the money in Fund 46, we would have gotten aid this year. But that money wouldn't be available to us this school year. And then just one example with COVID, we got CARES Act money. CARES Act money is a federal grant program through the state of Wisconsin. We've already spent $500,000 on responding to COVID-19, and now we have to make a claim on that to get that aid. And we're going to get the payment from DPI. But again, it's a matter of cash flow and when we make the expenditures versus when we make the claim and receive the funds. So that's just one example of how this year is different than last year. And I thought putting money into fund balance is very prudent. We're not going to just go out and spend money for the sake of spending everything we receive. And it's reflecting in because we've spent less, we're outlying from the state, we're receiving less state aid this year as a result. And we were likely to receive less state aid because the year prior, again, we're comparing last year to the year prior, we spent out of fund balance the year prior. We didn't do that this past year. So that's really the difference.
But do you feel there's any more certainty on what the legislature is likely to do, how much income the state is likely to have? Is there any more certainty on that now than there was
Yeah,
when
I
you
think,
put that money into fund balance?
further in the presentation, I'm going to show you the revenue limit formula. And declining enrollment is a concern. That in itself is a concern. What is the legislature going to do as a concern? I think what's important to note, and we'll get to it in the revenue limit formula, this tertiary value, so as a district, relatively speaking, we're to the far left. We're a low-spending, relatively real estate poor district. We get poverty aid. That means more than 50% of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. Being prudent with our funds is the right thing to do.
Plus, I think the legislature's actually got to get back into session before they're going to do anything anyway. And I don't see that happening anytime in the near future.
Okay, questions on the aid formula? Okay, so let's talk about the changes. So we kind of had a double whammy between getting less aid and now the revenue limit formula. So what I've got up here, and I know it's a lot of numbers and it's hard to sift through, but I want to compare this year's revenue limit formula to last year. First of all, we're at the low revenue limit ceiling. That means districts, we get like a ceiling, a floor, saying that last year we could spend we could receive revenue, $9,700 per student. It increased to $10,000. So that's the first change, $300 more per student. Then you take our enrollment. You compare our 3-year rolling average last year. The formula is real simple. You just take the 9,700 times the 2,281, bang, you got your base revenue limit. It's that simple. So what the state said is you take our number dropped, 2194 times 10,000 gives you the 21,940,000. But then the state says, whoa, you can't have less of a base for 1 year. You can't have less of a base than you had the previous year. So they're giving us $185,000 more to bring us back up to the base. So at this point, we're the same, year to year. Our base is exactly the same. But we lost more kids this last year than we did the previous year. So we get a one-time declining enrollment exemption. That number's real simple too. Take the number of kids you lose times the low revenue limit ceiling, and that's how you get the 870,000. So the first difference is you can see our declining enrollment exemption is greater this year than it was the year before. So we're getting a little more authority so that we can have the cash to make adjustments and get us ready for the next school year. So then we had a little tax refund. I'm not exactly sure how we would have gotten it. The Department of Revenue says, hey, there must have been taxes uncollected that were finally collected. We got a little bit there. Then Mary Kay was working with DPI, and we didn't count a couple of kids that we thought were open enrollment, and they gave us credit for that, so we got almost an extra $40,000 there. And then the private school voucher, it went up. Their enrollment went up. So we're going to tax more for those students that are attending Peace Lutheran School. So that increased our revenue limit authority. So between the two columns, we increased our revenue limit authority by $324,000. So we take the drop of $700,000 in state aid, the $324,000 in additional revenue limit authority, and that's the reason why the levy's going up $1 million. Questions? Okay, and I hope I'm not driving it in too deep. So this is, now we got this cap. This is an explanation of how we kind of break down, how we divvy up this revenue limit authority. And again, you can see the difference in general aids. That's the 700,000. I mentioned high poverty aid because we have greater than 50% free and reduced lunch. We get a categorical aid for that. And then the Department of Revenue has a couple exempt property, both computers and inventory, personal property. And we look at our allowable limit authority. So we are $1 million more revenue limit authority. And here's what I want you to understand. We have general operations, that's our Fund 10, for $8,830,000. Then we have this Fund 38 debt. That has to come in under the revenue limit. And then we have the community service levy for the pool, $270,000. At the committee of the whole meeting, I didn't expect that state aids would drop as much as they did. I don't think it's prudent to increase the community service fund, given what's going on within the just the other two levies. So our total tax levy, comparing the two, is $9,402,036. Okay, now I want to spend a little bit of time, without being too confusing, talking about equalized property value in apportionment, if we could. And we've reviewed this before. So this is an example of, this is what that I included a sheet in your handout. And essentially it's looking at our 19 municipalities. And I've got them ranked based on 2019-20. And you can see we've got Upham as being a very small 0.5% of our equalized value versus the city of Antigo at 32.7. And if you look at a 3-year history, you can see the rankings really haven't changed at all. I mean, when you look right across the columns, there's only 2 townships that would change. And if you look at Summit versus Plover, there would be this year a change in ranking. But essentially, these 19 shake out this way, and they have for a number of years. But what's important is to notice the percentage difference in changes. So if we look at the city of Antigo, it appears that its percentage of our equalized value is going down slightly over time. Some of the neighboring townships are going up over time. And if we look at like the town of Rolling, you can see the town of Rolling is gradually getting a bigger share of our equalized property values. The town of Antigo, likewise, is doing the same. The town of Langlade is doing the same. So now I've ranked them by change. Overall, our equalized property values have gone up 1.9%. This ranking shows you the swing between each municipality, where the town of Summit had a negative value of 5.14%, and on the flip side, the town of Langlade increased property value by 5.56%. Overall, the whole district, it's 1.9%. But you can see those that will have a less property impact because their rate of increase is less versus those who are increasing in property value. So when you set the levy and you have a mill rate, every person, depending on where they live and how their fair market value on their taxes compares to their neighbors, that change affects what they're going to be paying in property tax. Questions? Okay, so this kind of pulls it all together. And I want you to refer to the far right-hand column. We're going to be levying $1,028,455 additional dollars onto the levy, which will be an increase of 12.828%. But look at the difference. And you can look at, if you look at that Summit Lake where we showed their property was going down in value, that apportionment of our levy is going to affect them by 4.4%. So not so bad. If we look at someone like the town of Langley, they're going to see an increase on their levy, so the amount we're putting into the levy, not the mill rate, of 16.22%. Overall, the levy will be $9,402,036. And we're adding 12.2%. But each township is going to see a different amount and a different percentage. That's the point I'm trying to drive home. So questions?
Okay, this might be the time where we should go back and make that motion. I think, Tim, you did a great job of explaining that, and I'm glad that we all have a better understanding before we do make this motion. And before somebody makes that motion, you know, Tim's last line there is, can we mitigate the impact and the drop of state aid? And the only way we would do that, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, is to take money out of fund balance.
That's correct.
For part of it. So, with that, it's probably time for a motion there.
I move the board approve a tax levy of $9,402,036 with an estimated mill rate of $8 per $1,000 of assessed value.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we'll go on with discussion. Anybody have anything they want to say?
It's the nature of the beast. When you have declining enrollment and property values are bouncing around, you can only best guess it. Tim did a fine job of explaining it. Yeah, it's a lot of it's looking in a crystal ball and hoping for the best, but unfortunately we know that that's not right either. So it's under the circumstances, I think it's probably the best thing we can do.
If we took all the money out of fund balance, would we be spending the same amount or less overall, and then end up with less state aid because we spent less? We wouldn't necessarily be spending less this year, but we'd be spending next year, or sometime we'd be spending less. Or is that a wrong way to think about that?
JD, I think you got it. So, I think the question is, if we use fund balance in replace of the levy, how does that affect our state aid? I mean, that's essentially the question. Remember when we looked at that plot, and let me see if I can get it there. Okay, so when we look at this plot, this shared cost, so when we're looking at this number, shared cost is what's under the revenue limit. They don't really care whether that shared cost comes from equalization aid or it comes from the levy. If we replace the levy with fund balance, we've stayed at the same point here. We're going to get the same amount of aid. We're not gonna get more. If we spend more, we're gonna get more. So if we spend more than, let's say, the low revenue limit ceiling of 10,000, and we spend 10,500, we're gonna get more aid. But by replacing fund balance, or levy with fund balance, we aren't going to get more aid. We're gonna get the same aid. What's interesting about where we are, because we've got declining enrollment exemption, if the legislature doesn't touch the low revenue limit ceiling, if they don't mess with that in the next biennial budget, we can use fund balance, and we will be made whole by the low revenue limit ceiling. If we were a district that we under-levied and we had no revenue limit exemption, we would be able to pick up whatever we didn't levy this year, next year. But because we have revenue limit exemptions, declining enrollment, and hold harmless, we can't pick it up. But we can use fund balance to replace it. The question you have to ask yourself as board is, we have to judge, how's our community doing under COVID, and how are we going to respond both to COVID and to declining enrollment. So I think there's a balance we need to play between use of fund balance and using fund balance prudently going forward. You know, if we're focused on student achievement, that's going to take more money than we spent last year and probably in previous years. And we're going to need fund balance to mitigate declining enrollment and improve student achievement. There's no two ways around it. But we also have a community that's responding to COVID. And as a board, I think you have to balance that. What that right number is, I can help you walk through that, but that's something you're going to have to work on your own.
JD, are you asking for the money that we saved last year to be used, or the total $1.2 million to come out of fund balance? The reason I ask is, if we're going to tax for the 1.2, we're going to be raising tax, right, Tim? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if we tax for the 1.2, we're going to be raising the tax. So how is our community responding to COVID? I believe that our community is suffering somewhat because of COVID. I mean, we just heard Dr. Deep talk about the rates going up. So, yeah, we thought we were wise in putting the money last year into fund balance, that $800,000, but it's actually come back to bite us in the end, according to what Tim is saying. So rather than saying, yeah, we have this $800,000, we're going to hold on to it, but yet we're going to tax the community even more, I don't know that I personally can say yes to that with saying we have this money in fund balance. And I see where JD's going. I know that the $800,000 is not enough to cover the shortfall, because we would be, what, Tim, $400,000 short?
I think it's only $1,028,000.
Yes, correct.
So
say that again, Dr. Deep.
It's $1,028,000. It's not 1.2.
Oh, okay. So we only need like 200,000.
Yeah, just over 230,000.
So I'm kind of leaning like JD. Let's look at the $800,000 that we put into the fund balance last year. Use that to help mitigate the problem of the low revenue ceiling for this year, plus take the extra $200,000 out of fund balance and say no to a tax increase to the community. I think that is being very wise to our community and being good stewards of our finances in this time of being COVID responsible.
I have to go back to JD's question, because either I didn't understand your question, JD, or I didn't hear you answer it, Tim. And I think what I heard JD say was, if we take the $400,000 now and use it, we're going to get state aided on, or I should say, whatever we take out of fund balance, right. 800,000. If we take that out now, we'll get state aided on it. But if we would raise the levy and take that out next year or the year beyond and spend beyond our levy, would we get even more state aid then?
Yes.
That is what because I hate to go and raise a bunch of taxes either and give myself a huge tax increase on all that farmland, but I don't know, I mean, we didn't buy the best reading program, to be $200,000 right there. What's our deferred maintenance budget, $10 million or something? You know, it's not an easy, decision at all. We're plenty short of money all the time around here, and if we could maybe, I don't know, if we had 25 more cents and we're stuck at 750 and held it flat for 5 years with our declining enrollment, we might be better off. But we can't do that right now.
I looked at that one chart you had, Tim, where you compare what our tax levy is compared to other communities.
From last year.
Yeah, they're from last year, not this year, though.
They're from last year, but Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, if we looked at that in any given year, would that chart look about the same, even though the numbers change, but the columns would look about the same?
Andy, I think last year when Anago was at $7.26, and don't quote me, but the state average was probably right around $9.50 or a little more than that, maybe closer to 10. But we recently, and if you've seen the charts that we've run, and I don't know if this has got it on here. You can see where Anago is up until this year. The red line is state average mill rate, and you can see where Anago it's diverging. But remember, the mill rate includes general obligation, debt, schools that are taking on debt, whether for operational referendums or for construction. And so the state average, they are spending more than we are.
So anyway, my point there was that as a community, we tax less. As a school district, we do less too. And one example would be the CARES Act. We took a big chunk of the CARES money and bought devices so our students would be one-on-one. And you can say, yeah, that really moved us forward. I say that caught us up. When I look at other districts, I have a niece in McFarland. Yeah, they've been one-on-one for years here. And so when we close schools, when they close school in a district that's one-on-one, they picked it right up and kept going. And we struggled. And student performance, I gotta think we fell behind. And so why I agree with Pastor Dan that I hate to put a tax increase here on our community. I also don't like to shortchange our students. And when I look at our community, I'm on the Economic Development Board, you get lots of data there. The unemployment rate right now is 6.2. Had a high of 13 back in March, was 3.1 before the pandemic came along. There's certainly plenty of job openings, either in manufacturing or service sector right now for people. But I don't think COVID and stimulus money has been equal for everybody in our community. I think some businesses got payroll protection and they just kept on doing business. This was just kind of like a little extra bonus for them. Other people and other businesses are suffering. If you're an employee and your hours got reduced from 40 to 30, well, that's a lot. Those 10 hours meant that was your excess spending maybe. And so I really struggle here with, I want to do the best for our students, and I want to be sympathetic to our community and people in our community. And so, you can talk about the 800,000. Let's just take that 800,000 out of fund balance. We can talk of something else too. We can say, let's take a portion. We could take 200,000 out. We could take 400,000 out. We don't have to go the whole distance. Yeah, so, that's my piece. Further discussion or comments? Jim?
Yeah, I just wanted to help put into perspective that we're looking at the 8% increase, or the increase, or the, excuse me, the rate of 8%. So that would be an increase of $75 per 100,000 in property taxes. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's
The numbers
correct,
personnel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to help people put that in perspective, I know I'm kind of piggybacking off of Andy that that may not seem like much, but given the circumstances to someone who Andy just said had their hours reduced, I feel like that could be a significant number. And I'm in agreement that maybe we should be looking at taking some of it out of fund balance. I don't think we should be draining fund balance because we don't know what next year holds, and I think we need to have as much cushion as possible. And with the legislature behaving the way it has been, I'm going to be very conservative going forward in how we're going to be spending. So that's just my 2 cents.
Any other comments or questions here?
Just one. Our policy does stipulate that the fund balance shall be maintained at a level sufficient to minimize or avoid short-term borrowing for cash flow purposes. So if we go a little too overboard on trying to take things out of fund balance, we're going to put ourselves in a bigger hole. So we need to, anything we're going to do, we need to be, as you've said, prudent and cautious.
Tim, how much can we take out to get to that 10%? We are at 12.28% now on balance.
We finished the year, let me get that slide up.
I think 2 years ago we did go below the 10%.
We were right at the verge.
In 1920, we were at 15.92%.
So we're at 12.24% in 18-19, and last year we finished the year at 15.92%. There is a balancing act, and I think to what Mike talked about, last year we short-term borrowed for the same amount that we did this year. When we got to this time period, we had a second payroll in November last year. And in all funds available cash, we had $52,000 after we short-term borrowed for $650,000. My way of thinking, we need to up short-term borrowing. And as you'll see from later in the discussion, the rates are very inexpensive right now. It doesn't cost us a ton of money to do that. But 3 or 4 years ago, that was costing us $25,000 and $30,000 to do it. Pretty soon you get to the cost of a teacher. So there is, we're a $30 million operation, and to get down to $52,000 in cash, that's not a very comfortable spot for the business manager to be in. So there is a balancing act there, and I think, my comment to both Julie and Andy have been, our community's been there with COVID with us. We're working through this quarantine, we're working through Fridays remote. There's a lot of in this together. I don't think it's prudent to take it all, given the fact we're going into a biennial budget. It's 2 more years of unknown. There is a balancing act. We're in the business of educating children. Other communities are spending more. So as a board, you have a better sense than I do. But I've got to look out for our financial well-being and to be able to prepare for the future. So proceed cautiously, however you decide.
Can you type on your spreadsheet right there? So if we take 200,000 out, what percentage is that at versus take 300,000 out?
So, JD, so I've got up, and let me zoom into this.
I guess, yeah, what's it make the mill rate and what's it make the fund balance percent?
Okay, so we're going to zoom to this section. So what I've got is I've got our levy authority, and that I pulled from the revenue limit, what we just talked about. So if we under levy by 200,000. So that looks, we'd be adding 57 cents to the mill rate. So we're going from 726 to, what is that, 763?
Jim, are you still talking?
I'm thinking.
He's trying to type some numbers in here, JD, it's not
Just a little
working quite
pressure,
right.
like 50 people watching you.
Okay.
You need a minus or something?
Yep. Okay. So 200,000 brings it down to 783. We do 400,000 is adding 40 cents. It brings it down to 766.
So that would be about half.
That's half.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make sense of, I'm new here, okay? So I heard the figure $75 on $100,000 is gonna be taxed, right? If you own a
Additional.
All right, if you own a $100,000 home, your taxes are going to go up $75 a year, is that correct?
Correct.
Comes to about less than 25 cents a day.
I'm just going to bring up one more thing here that's a little further out, and that is, I think for all of us who have been here, we realize that at some point we're going to run an operating referendum. You know, I think we've done a pretty good job of avoiding that because state aids have increased in categorical aid and stuff, and we've consolidated. But looking forward, we're going to have declining enrollment, and we're just going to end up short of money here. And so,
Especially trying to have competitive teacher pay.
yeah.
Low teacher, teachers are in high demand right now and there's a low supply.
And so that's the argument for keeping this money in fund balance is it may not be easy to get an operating referendum, and it might be good to have a little more cushion there.
Our history would suggest it will be very difficult, in which case we should keep the money, because we're going to need it.
Another thing that I've thought of, we were prudent, we did all the right things, and we're losing over $700,000 a year by doing the right thing. We're a poor district So conceivably, and correct me if I'm wrong, again, I'm new at this. If you were a rich district and you weren't behaving as prudently as we did, you could be getting more money from the state. Does that sound correct?
Again, depending on where you are on the,
If you're a property-rich district and you weren't as prudent as we are, the state could increase your funding? Is that what you said?
Wayne, if I can answer that, Tim.
Sure.
If you take Alco, for example, they got up, I don't know what their percentage was, but it was an increase, but they're only getting like $13,000.
Right.
Because they're so property rich,
Yeah,
they don't really get much state aid.
right.
Okay. Any more comments, questions?
Danny, would you like to see 800,000?
Sure. $7.32.
6 cents more. 6 cents more.
And that's if we took everything out that we put in last year.
Right.
I know that's a tough pill to swallow. However, I still think of our community, how our community has been affected by COVID. And with all due respect, I understand other communities have their situation, but this is Antigo. We need to focus on what Antigo is about and what is affecting us in our situation. I know we compare and contrast us to other districts. However, I still am a firm believer that the least amount that we can raise, if we raise at all, I think that's the best way to go in this time.
I'm somewhere between the take 200,000 out and the tax at all, even though I hate to raise taxes. I'm not sitting on the school board to keep taxes as low as I possibly can. I'd rather get the best education we can. You know, we can't get very much money very easily at all. Like,
And you don't know what the future will bring if this pandemic continues.
Exactly.
if I get voted off the board, I'll be happy.
Absolutely.
So,
And think about this for a minute, because we're talking about $800,000. What's the amount of money that's going into the voucher program out of our coffers? Right around $800,000.
Yeah.
So.
But
that's
those
something
kids
to
are
think
still
about
being
too.
educated. It may not be the way that we
I
want
understand
them
that,
to
but
be.
that's money that we are not able to use within our district, that the state is telling us this is what you're going to do, your goal. So we've got people literally taking money away from us that we have no control over.
and it's not in the tax statements.
True. And it should be.
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? And, see, we had a motion from Mary, is that correct?
Yes. Seconded.
And you're still good with that motion, Mary?
I get, yeah.
Okay. Then if there's no more discussion, we're gonna go ahead and do a roll call in.
Bolduc,
Yes.
Deep,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
No.
Schrader,
Yes.
Balzer,
Yes.
and Mary.
No. Okay, that motion passes, we'll move on. Item C.
B.
B, resolution, thank you, Danny. Resolution authorizing a taxable tax authorizing a taxable tax and revenue anticipation promissory note for cash flow purposes in the amount of not to exceed $650,000.
I move the board approve resolution 2020.01 as presented and select Associated Bank's letter of commitment for the line of credit.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on this item?
No, it's just saying that they're going to give us the opportunity to, if necessary, borrow.
That's something we've done every year.
Yes.
For several years.
Okay. If there's no discussion or questions, we'll do a roll call.
Deep,
Yes.
Gagnon,
Yes.
Long,
Yes.
Newfeld,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Schrader,
Yes.
Balzer,
Yes.
Bolduc,
Yes.
and Mary.
Yes. Item C, consideration to approve second reading of Neola policy special update March to September 2020.
I move the board approve the second reading of the Neola policy special updates March through September 2020, including PO 0167.1 voting, PO 2266 Title IX regulations, PO 5200 attendance, PO 6116 time and effort reporting, PO 8420.02 coronavirus disease, and PO 8450.01 personal protective equipment during pandemic.
Seconded.
Okay, any question or comments on these? We kind of went over the first reading of these. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes, and we'll go on to a report of employee resignations.
I move the board accept the following resignation: Ben Kessler, high school math teacher, effective November 6, 2020.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions or comments? Other than
Just-
we're sorry to see Ben go.
Wish the young man luck in his new endeavors.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we'll go on to item E, report of donations.
Move the board accept the following donations: $1,000 from Anico Tater Trot for elementary track and field day, $1,500 from Anico Tater Trot for Anico High School boys and girls track, $3,000 from Anico Tater Trot for Anico High School boys and girls cross country, $750 from Optimist Club of Anico for the high school PBIS, $5,000 from Gene Haas Foundation for the Gene Haas Scholarship, $5,000 from Point of Beginning Inc. for AHS football, $500 from Vasco, care of Mary Jo Hilbrand for the Vasco staff development, $182 from Zetas for Anico FFA, and $10,000 from Covantage Credit Union for the school forest, for a total of $26,992. We'd also like to recognize the following for their recent cloth face mask donations to the district: Phyllis Zabransky, Esperis Langler Hospital Women's Auxiliary, and Northern Wisconsin Face Mask Warriors.
Second.
Okay, thank you to all those who donated. Any other comments or questions?
What's the Gene Haas scholarship? It says it's from the foundation for the scholarship.
I can't answer that.
One will presume that the scholarship is after the...
Gene Haas scholarship.
Mike Parizek applied for that. I don't know the absolute details for it. It had to do with, Mike has gotten the money from the Gene Haas Foundation for his simulators, and I don't know all the details behind it, but it's through the CTE program. Clint,
House
do you know-
automation.
Yes, yes. Clint, do you know any additional information?
I know exactly what Tim told you.
Okay.
The only other comment, Andy, I'd like to make is, you saw the donation from Mary Jo Gilbrecht through the WASBO Foundation. And Mary Jo received an award from WASBO for her work. And it's, the donation is for the business office staff so that they can go to professional development. And she also gave half the award to, I believe it's either White Lake or Elko. So it was very commendable for her to do that.
Great. Great, so, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And before we adjourn and confirm the next meeting, which will be November 21st, Danny, if you just join me in front here for a photo op.
This is work clothes.
I have here Danny's certificate from WASB that he's reached a level 2 in WASB. And for those of you who are not familiar with levels, you get levels based on things you do in WASB, like attending meetings or serving on the delegate assembly. There's other things, but congratulations on reaching this milestone, Danny.
Thank you. Hands or not,
We did.
I know.
I suspect there's some.
There's sanitizer.
Okay, and with that, we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
How about letting us know the next meeting's on November the 24th at 6 o'clock here?
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Okay. And
I move to
now,
adjourn.
okay,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.